Now. Okay, hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to SIG API Machinery bi-weekly meeting. This is Kubernetes Open Source. Today is September 20, 2023, almost changing seasons around the world. And we have a nice agenda today. And why don't we just get to it? Ben, you have the first topic. I will give the spotlight to you.
Hi, everyone. So I brought up a few times before, a few different discussions leading up to the KEP that I've now opened for introducing a new data format, CBOR. And today I'm hoping to align on alpha criteria, as well as a phased implementation strategy for actually making this real and implementable. Essentially, the proposal is to support a new serializer in Kube for CR storage and serving of both CRs and native types. And because the blast radius is so large for introducing a new data format, it's important that we are very careful, right, in the implementation plan. So I've spoken with a lot of folks with experience introducing and changing Kube serializers, and accumulated a pretty large list of scenarios that I think need to be tested in order to have confidence that we're not repeating mistakes of the past. I don't know if it's a good use of time to enumerate those test cases, but they're in the KEP, in the test plan. But because this new serializer would be used to serialize custom resources, I think that that basically means that almost all of the graduation criteria need to be ready for alpha, right, before anyone can actually start using this to persist something. So maybe if we could scroll to the graduation criteria. Right, so basically right now, for alpha, I'm thinking the entire list of unit tests, integration tests, and fuzzed tests that are listed in the test plan must be implemented before this can even be exposed. And we also need to make updates to the dynamic client to allow it to use CBOR if explicitly enabled. And I think we also want client generation to support CBOR for folks who are generating clients for their CRDs. But I'm interested to hear other criteria that folks have.
Ben, could you briefly explain how we turn on client support? I think that was one of the really interesting problems with this, is that we don't have feature flags in clients, and so we got to have a plan for how to do that.
Sure. So we don't want to change the default behavior of the clients. So we either need clients to be compiled with, to be explicitly configured at compile time to use CBOR for writes or as a preferred read. Or David had also suggested potentially an environment variable that folks can set to explicitly force it on, even though it's disabled by default. So I'm interested to hear opinions on one way or the other, or a third way.
I think our client config has content type fields, which today we use to opt some clients into speaking proto or requesting proto. So in some cases, we already have a place in the config to indicate that we want CBOR. I agree we wouldn't default that to CBOR. I think it defaults to JSON right now, probably. So if we wanted to have an environment-driven way to make that default to CBOR and JSON, that could be plausible. So the combination of two things, like if you're programmatically constructing a client, you can say what you want. You can say, I want proto, I want CBOR, I want JSON. And then having defaulting be opt-in at first, and then be opt-outable once we graduate up to beta or GA seems reasonable.
Yeah, I think the ability to, for an operator to disable this in clients is useful to hedge against the risk that we discover some kind of serious bug after clients are using it. I think it would be convenient for operators to be able to set a force off environment variable, for example, to tell clients not to use it, versus having to recompile with a different client config.
Yeah, so I would include that, both of those stories in the alpha criteria. We need to have a clear picture about how you opt in and how you opt out. Something we had talked about the last time we met was the library that we use. We need to understand sort of the correctness and maintenance stories on that. I think the tests that you outlined probably cover the correctness aspects, but we need to make sure we can maintain the library or that it is maintained before we take dependencies on it.
So I included in the test plan section that we would actually either adopt an existing conformance test, or if necessary, start building our own conformance test to run against this for conformance with the CBOR spec, as well as fuzzing the serializer itself. I included some behaviors that we want to check, I think, in fuzz testing, including things like malicious input doesn't cause ridiculous heap allocations or crashes. But there may be other behaviors that we should check under fuzzing. I know one of the implementations claims to fuzz their library, but they haven't shared their fuzz tests, so we can't inspect that. And the other does not seem to fuzz. So I expect that in order to have confidence in how the decoder handles untrusted inputs, we're going to need to build up pretty decent fuzz coverage.
Okay, and then the maintainability aspect. I know we had issues with our YAML decoder in the past, kind of an unresponsive upstream, which caused issues around security reports and things like that. So if the upstream of the library we're looking at is not active, or we're concerned that there might be a lag there, we need to understand what we're going to do if there's an issue we need to fix quickly.
Yeah, so project health of the upstream project. I think that's reasonable. It's graduation criteria.
So given, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to mention on the project health thing, one of the things that I'd mentioned as an idea that I don't think we've ever tried before is asking CNCF to fund and sponsor whatever repo we decide to use. That might be beyond the scope of our SIG, but it doesn't seem like a bad idea. Like, if we end up maintaining the thing, we're going to pay a whole lot more for it than whatever we would pay to sponsor it. So we might as well just do it. I just thought.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think the worst case would be we sponsor it and we still don't get the level of responsiveness that we want.
At least we tried.
Yeah. Diego had a comment about Antoine finding edge cases around OpenAPI and server-side apply. I don't know if you'd had.
Especially if you have like the data types error handling, it might be related to Diego's comment, right?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was a lot about serialization and deserialization, and it was like Jenny and Antoine maybe a year and a half ago, and they spent months and months and months trying to. And it comes down to the edge cases. Like you can get pretty far pretty quickly, and then the edge cases, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. So it was mostly just about if we have some framework for testing that might be reusable, it might be useful.
I should hunt that down. Oh, Ben, this one thing I noticed is that we're talking a lot about Go so far. I feel like, I mean, we do have other language clients. I'm not sure exactly if it should be a graduation criteria, but I feel like before we get to GA, we should need some kind of validation that we're interoperating across a reasonable subset of languages.
Do you think we should explicitly test round tripping to other implementations, or just invest in conformance with the spec?
It might be that we want to do conformance with the spec and then also show that there are language bindings for a set of languages that we anticipate that we're going to need in the future. I agree everything should conform to the spec, and if one language doesn't, that's not necessarily should be a showstopper for us, but you know, if like we can't do Python or something, I would really like to know now.
Okay. I know there's also potentially substantial differences in, you know, what native language representation each implementation will do based on what's idiomatic for that language.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of discussion about how this would handle streaming, like whether it would resemble our proto streams or our JSON streams. Does that seems important to understand before we release?
Yeah, I've suggested that we use, there's actually an RFC that builds on CBOR called CBOR sequences. It basically defines a CBOR sequence with a MIME type as the concatenation of 0 or more CBOR data items. And similar to the property that JSON objects have, that you can effectively match object start and object end to determine the boundaries of objects. CBOR also has that property. It also has provisions for length prefixed framing in the same spec.
Okay.
So I think it would be nice to build on that, since there's several years old work in that space.
Okay, similar to what we were saying about other languages, if this is sort of an additive spec, it would be good to know what support libraries have for CBOR streaming, or if it's the kind of thing that you could take those libraries and pass a stream to it, chop up a stream, and use those existing libraries, even if they don't have built-in support for streaming. I just want to make sure we don't choose sort of an additive thing on top of CBOR that has inconsistent support.
Okay, I'll look into that.
When you talked about the default, like between JSON and CBOR, are you going to say like why we are giving, why it can be better for users to use CBOR, like payload size would be increased, or some of the performance improvements, or is it going to be their choice? Like thinking of giving some ideas to users why CBOR would be good for the configuration setting.
Yeah, I think anytime that you currently are using JSON mechanically, so from a controller or similar, you would want to use CBOR strictly because it's less expensive to encode and decode, and it's also slightly smaller. The The cases for JSON and YAML that I don't think are superseded are anything where a human is editing or maintaining the representation. Like I don't expect this would be appealing for someone to store in the GitOps workflow. But yeah, the primary reason to propose this at all is significantly faster encode and decode with fewer heap allocations.
Yeah, and that speed, it not only does it matter to the users, but that is reduced load on the Kube API server, which is important to us.
Fortunately, the thing that is easiest to switch on the client side is to eventually make clients say, I will accept CBOR or JSON. And so they will work perfectly well with old API servers that don't know about CBOR, and sort of transparently accept and decode either. The write path is harder to switch, but the read path is actually the one that benefits the API server the most, and it's easier to switch, which is fortunate.
Yes, that's already supportable via regular content type negotiation. So the other thing I hope to get some feedback on is a plan to implement this in a phased way that prevents us from either having an enormous fork for many months at a time on one end versus making it possible for someone to turn on CBOR in their Kube API server build before we have all of these tests passing and all of the criteria satisfied. So I have a small section here called phased implementation, where effectively the idea is we would implement a kill switch inside Kube API server, where if it starts up and CBOR is present in its supported content types, then it will panic or be otherwise a fatal error. So you can't run a Kube API server supporting CBOR. That would be the initial sort of a safety. Next, we would proceed with completing the huge list of tests and any other due diligence we need to feel confident that the serializer is behaving the way we want it to. And then strictly in order to be able to write integration tests, we would make it possible just via code injection in an integration test to start a Kube API server that supports CBOR. Obviously, next would be all integration tests implemented, and the rest of the alpha criteria could be implemented at that point before even introducing the feature gate that would allow users to turn it on. So that would sort of one of the final steps would actually be making it possible to build CAS and flip a switch to turn on CBOR. So I'm curious to hear, beyond missing alpha criteria or missing test cases, if there's missing steps here in the high-level rollout plan. Or just anything else we might want to do to increase our confidence that no one's going to be able to start persisting CRs as CBOR by accident.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I followed, but the actually wiring it into the effective server config and actually building it into the clients, the capability into the clients. If those are the last things we do, then and we only do that once we have the feature gate and the opt-in mechanism in client side. That seems pretty reasonable. I think you could define the serializer package. We have a JSON serializer package and a protobuf serializer package that are just sort of standalone packages. You can define those and do a lot of the unit tests without ever wiring it up to anything. And then if the server wiring initially only happens in integration tests and isn't even connected for normal servers, that lets you do a lot of the round tripping server stuff in integration tests only, and it's still impossible to enable when you're running a real built binary. So if the real built binary and the client stuff is the last thing to happen, I think that's a pretty reasonable phased approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I expect 90% of the work occurs before any serializer is wired to the codec factory.
Yeah. Ben, I really appreciate the level of detail in the testing that we're doing here. I think it feels like we've learned our lesson from previous encoders and we're trying to get it right. Yeah, I think it's fine to phase it in, and I think the ordering. I'll read over the details of the ordering, but I think what you guys are saying makes sense.
Great, thanks. And I guess just one last thing. I know Joe has volunteered to be a reviewer, just like folks who are interested in officially being reviewers or even approvers on the KEP. Just reach out to me or let me know.
Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Ben. I was presenting, so I didn't want to switch and take notes, but it looks like somebody or yourself was able to capture what you needed. Otherwise, it's recorded. Thank you. Okay, let's move to the next one. CC, I see you there. How are you?
Hi, good, thanks.
Very good. Take it on.
Yeah, so I have two agendas here. The first one is the shared validation rules, and this feature, as people might already know, has been staying in beta since 1.25, and I'm here to propose that we promoting this feature to stable in this current release, and we actually was trying to promote it to stable last release, but since we don't, we were like basically modifying the API, and we don't want to like updating the API together with promoting it to stable. So we hold it for one more release, and we have cleared all the, I hope the G criteria from the previous releases. So yeah, I'm here just to see if anyone has objections on that.
For anyone not aware, this is being adopted by a variety of projects, including Istio, Gateway API, things like that. So we've been getting a lot of feedback on the feature.
Yeah, the adoption. Thanks for mentioning that. The adoption process is going well, and people were really excited about this feature. I think this feature, since it stayed in beta for more couple releases now, it should be pretty mature to graduate it to stable. So.
Any like test cases that we want to add end-to-end tests or integration tests, that is for like before we are mentioning that this is a stable feature, like
Yeah, from the alpha and beta phases, we have added a lot of tests. So I guess we're pretty confident about the test coverage. We have a lot of not only the unit test, integration test, E2E test, but also like some tests to ensure the cell library stability. And yeah, but please feel free to raise if any cases we missed, and we will be more than happy to add it.
There were a couple discussions that I remember in the last few weeks. One was around like the behavior of the has functionality, comparing like specific properties to maps and additional properties. And then one recently talking about a cost sizing change between 127 and 128. Yeah. Those are, I would recommend doing a sweep of any issues that have been reported and making sure we've root cause and like understand them. And in some cases, it might have been something that actually got fixed during beta. And so the explanation is it's now fixed. Now we understand this and have tests and are stable. The has behavior difference between properties and maps seems like something we should understand in greater detail on the way to GA, but I'm happy to see it wrapping up in 129.
Yep. Thank you so much. Yeah, I will have like all the issues. Maybe I'll later add all the issues we tracked there as well. So yeah, and we'll definitely like solve all the upcoming issues before we promote it to stable. I'll take the silence as no objection if people didn't raise their voice. And cool, thank you so much. And I'll move to the second one, which is the validating admission policy. And as people might already know, like we promoted the validating admission policy to beta in the last release, which is Kubernetes 1.28. And just to be clear, we don't plan to promote it to GA in this release of 129. But I do want to clear the GA graduation criteria beforehand. So later, when we are ready to promote the feature to stable, then we make sure we checked everything and we are fully ready. So that's a list which I currently think about. So please let me know if I missed anything. I'm not sure if yeah. I think not this. Oh yeah. So there is some like issues coming from the previous beta promotion, and there are some things related with adoption and scalability. So yeah, please go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so Jordan, you might have a thought on this. When we promoted validating and mutating webhooks, I think we did them together. Should we have an expectation of a minimum stability level for mutating admission policy before we take validating admission policy to GA?
I don't think that's strictly necessary. If we think that we will discover things during mutating policy that would change the shape of the API, maybe we would like voluntarily wait, but I don't think it's required that this wait for mutating to graduate.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I think it's mostly going to be that validating forms mutating, but we should have an early alpha of mutating. So if there is anything that we should probably know before we go to GA, anyways. Okay.
I think the early alpha of mutating should be like should be not like at least after like this validating going to GA. So like it should be we should have time basically if we really caught something like the API should change or something. Yeah. Cool. Like if people do have like opinions on that, please feel free to comment on the PR. Yeah, I have the PR link there. Yep.
Yeah, and we do have the adoption there is moving along. OPA Gatekeeper has done a significant level of integration and adoption.
Yeah, I think
Carvana's using Cell to some level. They're not using this exact feature yet, but there are people using it.
Yeah, Kavana mentioned like they already have like the validating admission policy embedded with their report API. So and the report API they plan to promote it to the Kubernetes 6 level. So yeah, that's an option for me.
Great.
Have we gotten feedback on the validating admission policy? I know we were a little worried about it's a beta API, it's not on by default, so it takes more effort for people to get it on and try it out. Have we gotten like how much feedback have we gotten on it?
Yeah, I think that's a problem like for the major cloud providers to use it because its beta is turned off by default, and it's hard for like the major cloud providers to like turn it on and to try it. But we do get feedback from like other customers and they reach out for like any issues or use cases they were playing with validating admission policy. I think I forgot the company name, but people reach out.
Yeah, we're not getting this broad spectrum as I would like to see because it's off by default. So like, OPA Gatekeeper, it's, we have contributors from that project who worked with us as we built out the feature. And, we also built a webhook implementation of this so people could try it out. And so, we were able to get them to kind of do almost a first party testing of it and make sure it works for all their needs. But yeah, I would like to see more broad spectrum, but CC, I know you've gotten some signals, so maybe we just summarize that before we go to GA and just make sure we have.
Yep. I can summarize in a doc before GA.
I wondered if we wanted to include or be more specific in our graduation criteria, like that we would be able to point to real webhooks that were able to be translated into Cell, like whether we did the translation or whether someone else was doing the translation and we could reference it. I know being able to replace webhooks was a key motivation. It would be good to make sure that we're actually able to do that or someone else is actually able to do that.
I like that idea. I like the idea of actually showing concrete conversions that have happened.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I'll note that down.
Okay.
Yeah,
What you needed, CC?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, and finally we have something from Mo.
Hey, so I just had a question because I've been helping Nilek with the KEP for SVM and Tree, and I know David had mentioned that we should try to use Streaming Watch, and I am in the process of reading the KEP for Streaming Watch, but I was just gonna ask, does anybody know exactly how that's supposed to work? Like I'm having a hard time mentally mapping. I have a paginated list with very special continue token semantics where I can cheat and do all sorts of things. And I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to turn that into a streaming watch. Like, am I supposed to do a watch from resource version 0, get all the items and wait till I get the bookmark and say that that was good enough? And if so, how does that help if you get a compaction in the middle and the API server can't give me a complete list? Because the list is still consistent. Anybody know?
I don't think I'm going to be able to do this one off the top of my head.
Why not, Joe? Because I ain't got nobody else to ask.
I actually know more about the streaming watching than the tricks that the storage migrator uses in the paginated approach. So I think I've got a knowledge gap there.
So the gist is in the SVM API, we have in the spec of that object, there is a field to put the continue token. And when you do a paginated list, if you end up getting to a point where a compaction has occurred and the API server is unable to give you a consistent list, it'll say, sorry, this is expired. But in the response, in the status response, it'll tell you, by the way, if you want to not have a consistent list, here's the continue token, go crazy. And so SVM looks for that and purposefully does an inconsistent list and so forth and so on. I just don't understand how to turn that into streaming semantics, or if such a semantic can even be expressed. Because just scanning the streaming watch KEP, it's got the word consistent at least 10 different times because it's very much trying to make sure you don't do the wrong thing. But in this case, I just need a list that was sort of consistent.
I would probably direct you to Wojtek or the other folks who, the authors of that or people who implemented the streaming stuff.
Great. Good. If we don't know off the top, that's fine. I'll go ping Wojtek. It's fine.
Yeah, sorry, Mo. I am happy to listen in though, because I would actually like to know a couple more of the details on this. So feel free to press me on to anything you do.
Okay. Good.
Okay. if you don't find the answers or nobody has the time, I can try to reach out to some of the previous authors of this part, but I don't know how successful I will be.
I mean, I'd love to see Chow show up for a SIG API Machinery meeting.
Or Hawaii, you know, one of those I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna read the KEP more thoroughly and then try to find all the code that got changed, so to see if I can mentally map how the feature like works in relation to all the other ways we have of doing the same thing.
Okay. If you struggle, ping me on Slack and I will try to be a bridge.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, and I think with that we covered all the topics for today. Thank you for coming and participating, and hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great Wednesday and enjoy the last day of the season wherever you are. Bye bye.
Thanks.